so for those who have joined us, thank you so very much. Let me just, for protocol, just close all the things that will make a noise, like WhatsApp. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. As my accounts, as we've been working so hard and so long to get to this day of finally, sorry for that. Sorry about that. Yeah, so finally launching the Whose Vote Counts tool as a tracking tool that tracks the private funding of political parties. It's been almost a whole year coming to put this together. So we are joined by, well, obviously us, My Vote Counts, and it's put together by Open Up, the amazing people of Open Up, who will be taking us through the features of the tool. So we are 10 minutes in, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Just to know that after the two presentations, we will have a Q&A as well. So please, you can make use of the Q&A box at the bottom to pose your questions to either our Executive Director, Minhaj Gina, who will be the next speaker, as well as Adam Oxford from Open Up. So Minhaj, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Shaylin. Welcome everyone to the very exciting official launch of the interactive virtual tool called that we're calling Whose Vote Counts. I don't really have a presentation. I'm just going to introduce what we're going to do. My name is Minhaj. I'm the director at My Vote Counts, a small NGO based in Cape Town that has a particular interest in democracy in South Africa and deepening democracy and deepening public accountability. And one of the main ways that we're doing this is through a program that we're calling Money in Politics. And in this program, we're trying to understand who funds our politics and why our politics funded in particular ways, and who influences our politics. And we have a particular interest in understanding what we call the toxic relationship between money and politics, and removing that toxic relationship, or making it less toxic. Because we know that since the early 90s, before 1994, as the country was emerging into democracy, money has been used to buy politicians. Very crudely, less crudely, to influence decisions that politicians make, also less crudely to get access to politicians, which means access to the state, which means access to influence, etc. And before 1994, this was used in crude and less crude ways, like sending senior members of the ANC's kids to private schools, or putting senior ANC members who have come out of exile, who have come out of prison, etc., into beautiful 5-star hotels. And post 94, it became more crude. The Zondo Commission lays bare how money was used in different ways to influence politics, in some cases to to actually buy ministers, and these type of things, we believe, subverts a key tenet of our democracy: the people must govern. It takes power away from ordinary South Africans, and power is taken away by people with money, and by people with money at the expense of our democracy. But then in 2021, 2 years ago, the president signed into law the Political Party Funding Act, which I believe is one of the most important pieces of legislation for our democracy since the Constitution. It's the first piece of legislation that legislates the toxic relationship between money and politics. It's also the first piece of legislation that gives us some insight into how political parties operate. It does three main things. The first is linked to transparency. It forces both political parties and their donors to disclose all the funding above the threshold of 100,000 Rand annually, and they need to disclose this every quarter. The second has to do with accountability, recognizing that money buys influence. There's an attempt to limit that. So the Act places a 15 million Rand cap, annual cap, on how much donors can donate to political parties. And the third, in an attempt to create a pot of money where influence can't be bought, but democracy can be strengthened, the Party Funding Act makes provision for what it calls the Multi-Party Democracy Fund. And it's a fund that donors can donate to, and the Electoral Commission is mandated to distribute that money. The IEC, the Electoral Commission, it manages the Party Funding Act. Political parties and the donors disclose their funding to the IEC. The IEC then makes available quarterly reports every quarter. The IEC also has additional powers to do some investigations, but that's also quite limited. So the Party Funding Act is a crucial piece of legislation, and especially important for the work that we do. And in the past 2 years, since it came into effect, we've been responding to threats against the act. We've been making public, popularizing rather the disclosures, and trying to understand what those disclosures mean, who the main funders are, what the interests are, etc. And then last year, so about a year after the Party Funding Act came into effect, we were approached by our partners, Ndifuna Ukwazi, who does incredible work, mostly in Cape Town, around social housing and spatial justice. And they were interested in the DA's awful decisions in Cape Town around spatial planning, and they wanted to know if any funders who are linked to development within the Western Cape are funding the DA. At the time, we didn't know. We didn't have an answer to that. At the same time, another of our partners, an organization called the Health Justice Initiative, which emerged during COVID and did incredible work around vaccine equality, approached us and asked if we know of any pharmaceutical companies or or any health insurance companies that are funding the ANC or the DA, because they wanted to understand the government's decisions around vaccines and vaccine non-disclosures. Also, we didn't have the answer to that. We were approached by other organizations after that asking similar questions. So that prompted the need for something that helps us, that helps activists, that helps investigative journalists to understand better the relationship between money and politics, and understand who these donors are. So towards the end of last year, we worked with an investigative journalist to look at all the 60 some odd donors that were disclosed through the party funding process. And if it's a company, understand who the board members are. If it's a trust, who the trustees are. And if it's an individual, what the interests are. And from those board members, what are their business interests? Is it mining? Is it energy? Is it security, etc.? And we developed this long report, and we decided to take that report and put it into an interactive tool that uses especially civil society, especially activists, especially investigative journalists and other journalists can use to better understand these things. And that's where the idea and the concept of this incredible and very important tool came about. And I'm not going to say any more about that. I'm going to hand over back to Shaylin, who I think has the difficult job of launching the tool.
Thank you, Minhaj. Yes, I've been busy clicking away, making sure everything is okay, everything is fine. But didn't need to do that because we are officially live. So the Whose Vote Counts tracking tool, which you can find on our website, is officially live for everybody to use. And I want to go into the features, but that's not my job. This is why we have Adam, just to go through the features, the wonderful features and all the beautiful graphs of the tool Whose Vote Counts, which you will find on our website, myvotecounts.org.za. You'll see it there, loud and proud. So Adam, would you please just take us through the tool, the graphs, how we can use it, how we interpret the data, and then once Adam has concluded, we will go for a round of Q&A. So Adam.
Thank you very much, Shaylin. That's much appreciated. And hello, everybody. Yeah, so just by way of introduction, my name's Adam Oxford. I'm here as an employee of OpenUp, the technology partner that helped to produce this tool. If you're not aware of OpenUp, we're a relatively small organization based in Cape Town and Johannesburg that produce what we call civic technology. And what that actually means is that we're a non-partisan organization. We work with journalists, we work with non-profit organizations, we work with government. But our job, as we see it, is to make data actionable and empower citizens through data. So what we love doing is taking data like this, making it transparent, making it very, very actionable. And this was a really interesting and I think very important project to work with My Vote Counts on. And yeah, we'd definitely like to thank the team there for inviting us to get involved, because it is a kind of critical and very good use, I think, of the power of data to inform and cast a light on important aspects of democracy. So what you're seeing on the screen there, and I hope everybody can see my screen. Sometimes I have issues with screen sharing. It was working earlier, but if you can't, do shout. Is the tool as it's been launched. It'll look slightly differently on the My Vote Counts website. This is the a slightly larger version so that I can demonstrate it properly. And just before I kind of go through the features of the tool, I just want to kind of explain a little bit about the underlying data that's powering it, and importantly, what it actually shows. Because I think with any kind of data release and data explorer like this, it's important to understand the limitations, and maybe in some cases, that might be where part of the story is. So there's two data sets that we use to create this. And neither of them are particularly complicated data sets. They're both very, very straightforward and easy to work with. One is the quarterly release of data by the Electoral Commission that is released publicly and transparently on the IEC's website. And the IEC releases a spreadsheet with a list of donations that have been made or declared in the last 3 months to the various political parties. Those declarations only include donations, direct donations over 100,000 Rand. And My Vote Counts team, please correct me if I get the terminology wrong. But I think that's really, really important to remember when you're looking at this information. So all we've done is taken those spreadsheets and aggregated them, cleaned them up a bit so that they can be used for data visualizations like this. But what that means is that small donations are not included in there. And that's why, for example, the FF doesn't really appear in this Explorer very much, because a lot of its individual donations are much smaller than 100,000 Rand and come from members. And it also doesn't include things like the sale of tickets to gala dinners and so on, which are big money spinners for the parties. So this is only direct donations from individuals, trusts, and businesses. And I think, for me, I'm an ex-journalist, and one of the things that really stands out for me using this tool is that headline number at the top of just under 300 million Rand in the space of 2 years, because to me, that doesn't seem like a very big number for supporting the political parties across South Africa. And my first question would be, where's the rest of it? This is a really great step, and all the work that's been done to get the Transparency Act, the Political Funding Act, passed and enacted is fantastic and should be celebrated. But I think that number for me really says that this is really the start of the transparency process. We've now got a little bit of data to work with. It would be nice to have the rest of it. So that's the kind of overview of what's behind the tool. The other data set that we used is the one that Minaj spoke about there. My Vote Counts did a lot of research over the last 12 months, sort of investigating kind of different affiliations of donor groups and individuals, and a little bit of work on their background to see where their interests might lie. And we've basically brought that data into the dashboard at a very high level at the moment, but we can talk about that a little bit later. The dashboard itself is very, very easy to use, I think, and should be fairly straightforward to follow. The first thing you'll see is this big download all data here. So if you do want to get access to the underlying data and you want to get access to our version of the clean data that is prepared for visualization, you can grab it by clicking that button. It just makes life a little bit easier for you, rather than going through to the IEC site and downloading the historical archive of quarterly releases there. And then at the top of the Explorer, we've just put in these simple filter buttons so that you can choose what data is represented in the Explorer. Right now, it is every recorded, every declared donation that has been made, which in this box down here, so on the second tier of the Explorer, you can see the complete list of donations that have been made. And I think, again, what's a little bit surprising here is that over the 2-year period, there's only been 137 donations declared. And again, that seems very, very small. Raises questions about, where is the rest of the money coming from? So if you want to look at, for example, just donations made to the ANC, you can uncheck everything and have a look at ANC only, and you'll see the whole dashboard will refresh with just donations made to that particular party, and the same for all the other parties there. The filters are fairly self-explanatory. The donation type is this covers both monetary and in-kind donations. So actually, you know, when we're talking about pure hard cold cash, that is a number that is lower than the 278 million. It's actually 238 million. And then more importantly, I think, is looking at the timeframes that the Explorer covers. So right now we've got complete data from 2021 through to 2023, and the actual financial year there runs from April. So we are hoping to get the first release for the 23-24 data very, very soon. And then again, these are released quarterly, so you can break these down into individual quarters. Visualizations of the data, fairly straightforward to understand, I hope. At any point you can click into these visualizations. So here's the kind of the ring chart that shows you all of the money that's all of the donations that have been contributed to the Democratic Alliance over this period. I can click into the Democratic Alliance, and that automatically applies that filter again. So now we're only looking at DA data for all of the other tables. So to help with that, it'll help you navigate back to the raw data. You just click the reset filter button, and this all comes back again. In the set pane on the right hand side here, we've got the donations timeline broken down by party, and I think this is quite, you know, this kind of shows us the value of exploratory data analysis and basic visualization. You can see this is the local elections in 21, so there's a big spike of funding around the local elections in 2021, and then again, you know, another big spike of funding to the ANC here in the run up to NASRAC last year. So these are all kind of laid out as a timeline there, so that you can look at them, and that will change depending on which year you choose and so on. What we have included are a few links to resources on the My Vote Counts site, just to explain the background to the data. So there's the explanatory feature around the Party Political Funding Act is linked here, and further down we've got some notes around how we've used the data to aggregate donor groupings, which is what's in this ring chart here, and this is the one that I think is kind of quite interesting if you're looking at sort of how different groups of donors act together. So when we look at donor groupings, what we've done is we've taken I think the main one here is looking at the group of companies that is affiliated or associated with Patrice Motsepe, for example, and we've looked at what happens to the data when we group those companies together. And in that particular example, you can see transactions of essentially exactly the same amount coming from different groups in the company in the larger group all at the same time, which kind of sort of indicates that there's some level of coordination there happening with funding and so on. So there's a few key groupings there. Obviously, the Oppenheimer family are another big one. I think the appearance of Martin Moschel, it might surprise people who don't know about politics, because that's a name that isn't necessarily a household name like Patrice Motsepe and the Oppenheimers, and yet you know, he's a very, very big donor to the DA and also to Action SA. So big, in fact, that he got his own little grouping, all by himself, and then other kind of smaller groupings that really tail off. I mean, those are the big individual sort of groups of donors that we identified and grouped together. But you can go back to the raw data at any stage and kind of see our working out and agree, disagree, or identify other patterns that we haven't seen as well. And that's entirely likely. And what we've got in the rest of the Explorer after that, so this table here is the kind of the raw list of donations, all of the donations. But after that, we've kind of tried to show where those money flows go using this Sankey chart on the on the left. So we can see, African National Congress gets the lion's share of donations. Democratic Alliance is very, very close behind, which one of the things that struck us here is if you look at relative vote shares, this is completely skewed, that the ANC has a much bigger vote share than the DA, but attracts almost an equal amount of donor funding, and that's even more true for Action SA down here, who are obviously a much smaller party than those two, and yet really punch above their weight when it comes to fundraising from individuals. And the reason we wanted to include this is really to show that a lot of these donors are actually funding multiple parties. So you might think that the group of companies associated to Patrice Motsepe are linked to the ANC, but actually, that's not necessarily true at all. They're kind of funding multiple. Sorry, I'm going to use the reset filters button there, because that's clearly a good use of it. But you can see that they're obviously funding multiple parties and basically hedging their bets in different provinces, I think, depending on where the current political headwinds are blowing. And then the final part of it, sorry, the last two little bits of the dashboard. We've also looked at companies by their interest areas. So we've tried to separate out, based on My Vote Counts research, which companies are primarily interested in energy, mining, finance, and so on. This is actually really hard to do, because very few companies only have one interest area. A lot of these are actually conglomerates that work across multiple verticals. So where that's the case, if there's a really obvious primary business activity, we will have associated them with either mining or energy or telecoms and so on. Where there's not a primary business activity, we'll have dropped them into the other unknown box, or in some cases linked them back to the individual donors, because obviously some of these come from trusts that aren't linked to specific companies, or trusts that are linked to companies that are also linked to individuals. One of the other stories in here, again, with my journalist hat on, was actually that, and I genuinely don't know the answer to this question. I would love to know if somebody does know, but there are obviously restrictions around foreign donations from overseas organizations into South African politics, and yet there are some overseas donors that are listed as in the declaration. So again, that's kind of, it raises an interesting question for me. Is this a grey area, or is this absolutely allowable? I genuinely don't know. I should have looked that up. And then finally, the last part of it here, again, really, this is just to make the journalist's job a little bit easier where we can. I use the royal we here, because this was, again, entirely the My Vote Counts team's work. But what we've done here is also tried to include a little bit of background to some of the organisations, including lists of directors and so on. I think one thing we're looking at for a second version would be, are there other links between potential donors that are in the lists of directors of organizations? Are more companies interrelated than we realize based on the people involved? And for the individual donors, who are some of these people that aren't household names and so on? How do we sort of bring that data to the surface as well? But that's obviously a little bit more in depth, and something that we're holding back for the next version, hopefully. And yeah, that's it. Like I say, it really isn't the most complicated data underneath it to work with, but I think I'm very happy with what we've produced here in terms of making it, I think, very useful and very easy to explore. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, for that very detailed run through of Whose Vote Counts tracking tool, which is live. It is on our website, myvotecounts.org.za. And again, I mean, this is a very long, this was a very long process putting this together. But I mean, I think I'm just echoing Minhaj earlier. This is something that, My Vote Counts has been around since I think 11 years now. And this has been the core for our work, private party finding transparency and just making sure that, voters have this information to make an informed vote at the ballot box, allow for accountability and all of that. So with this tool, I mean, we really hope that it helps journalists, voters, activists, etc., better understand, possible links between donors and political parties. I mean, not all funding, not all private funding raises any red flags, but there is that possibility. I mean, if we think about the situation with the climate activists on the Wild Coast and the whole Shell situation, the online gambling bill that was introduced recently, and of course Martin Moshall being a very big online gambling investor, for instance. So it's really this just gives you this information and helps you, make those links between donors and political parties. For example, I don't think, Adam, did you manage to? I don't know if you can go back to the tool and maybe just show, if you can maybe just click on maybe like Martin Moshall and just how it like separates, so you can see what donor actually, who the party's donors donated to, just to give some more information. So if you maybe just go down to, Martin, are we just gonna click on Martin?
I'm trying not to single people out.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so just so you can, click on different things, and it will just kind of filter through the information for you. And as Adam said, if you scroll right down, we try our best at My Vote Counts just to get some additional information on the donors, like directors or any interesting information that we can find. Of course, the bulk of the information we do get from the quarterly disclosures. So the IEC, of course, as per the Political Party Funding Act, discloses this information on a quarterly basis. The first one for this new financial year should come out before the end of this month. Hopefully not today. I just want to take a rest. But yeah, and we will of course update this tool on a quarterly basis. Yeah, so I think let's open up to some questions. I think I'm going to just read out the questions, and Minhaj, Sipelo wants to know, how do we get this kind of information out to ordinary citizens? How do they merge the data to their decision-making when it comes to casting their votes? Minhaj, do you just want to give a comment to that, or an answer to that?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Look, what we've noticed is that party funding hasn't been central to conversations and debates around politics, especially in the build-up to elections. And next year we're going into what's probably our most consequential election since 1994. Therefore, funding of politics, the inclination to buy influence, is going to be a big topic, and I think this tool and this sort of information can be used by voters to try and understand manifestos, firstly, and why certain things are put in manifestos, and to understand how political parties or individuals can possibly be compromised. The information, I know it looks very complex and messy if you just look at what Adam is presenting. But we are trying to figure out ways to make it more accessible, and to use more accessible communication tools like WhatsApp, etc., to allow people to use this effectively. But that's a work in progress. But I do think it will be very valuable for voters and for communities.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it being a work in progress, I mean, look, what you're seeing right now is just the 2 years worth of private funding disclosures. Of course, the Political Party Funding Act is going through some chops and changes at the moment, and of course with all independent candidates as well. So there is a section, Adam did go through, there is a section if you have any suggestions or tips or anything, you can just like pop us an email by clicking the button there. But yeah, this is, for us, it's just really important to put this information out there because there isn't really anything like this anyway, just in general, just around party funding. And again, this is why my accounts essentially exists. I mean, this has been the one project we've done since we've started, you know, pushing for party funding transparency. So it's really our bread and butter essentially. So for us, it's really important to put this information out there. And again, like Minhaj said, it's a work in progress, but it's out there. Yeah, and if anybody has any suggestions or anything, you can please just let us know by using the link over there. Ezekiel, just for clarity, did the donations from foreign donors also include in putting together this portal? Because I think I just see the local donors. Yes, so as per the Political Party Funding Act, foreign donations is prohibited unless it is for skills development and training, policy development as well. And I think, I don't know if you can just maybe, I think it's just, so far, it's only just been the DA that's only ever received foreign donations. We are hoping that it is for what it is supposed to be for. So, like I said, policy development and education and training, foreign donations. Otherwise, it is therefore not prohibited as per the Act. I see another question. Given the dangers around regime change, should donations from abroad be allowed? How do we protect our sovereignty from the influence of foreign powers? Minhaj, do you maybe just want to speak about this? You know, like I just said, as per the Act, foreign donations is not allowed unless it's for policy development or skills development.
Yeah, that's an important question. I mean, in the development of the Political Party Funding Act, one of the core principles that was considered was the principle of sovereignty, and how foreign money can undermine and subvert the sovereignty of South Africa. And therefore, there are very, very strict restrictions placed on foreign donations for that reason. So that is addressed in the Party Funding Act. The donations are limited to what Shailene is saying. It's just for it's for political purpose, which is skills training and development. That's it. And there are also limitations placed on foreign governments. So foreign governments can't fund politics in South Africa. And if foreign entities do, it's very, very limited to protect the sovereignty in the kind of context that the person who asked the question is speaking about.
Yeah. Yeah, here's another question. At first glance, it looks like mainly national funding. The malfeasance is mainly in provinces. That's very, very interesting when we talk about like funding on provincial level. I mean, that is in terms of research in its own, it's quite difficult, especially to get that information. I know many organizations have been putting out like PIA requests to get this information, and it's quite, the PIA process in itself is quite tedious. But Minhaj, maybe you want to comment on you know, provincial funding. I mean, because the whole point of Whose Vote Counts, just to remind everybody that this comes out of it's based around the Political Party Funding Act, which deals obviously with funding of political parties. But this just brings in the element of provinces. Do you want to maybe comment on that, Minhaj?
Yeah, Fadila, the general questions around funding in politics is complex and very messy. The only information, so we have access to two sets of information currently. The one and the set of information that this tool is displaying is information around private funding to political parties as a whole. That is disclosed by parties. So importantly, it's only funding that's actually disclosed by parties and the donors. The second set of information that we do have access to that's not included in this tool is public funding. So a large percentage of political parties who are represented in Parliament, of their funding comes from taxpayers, and we do have limited but quite a bit of information on that funding. But there is internal campaign funding that we don't have sufficient information on, and there are organizations that are working on that. We're not quite clear how provinces, our parties within provinces, and parties at the national level on campaigns spend their money. That's something that needs to be addressed. So there is a big gap in the transparency regime around funding of politics. So I don't have a proper answer for you. That's all I can tell you for now.
Yeah,
can I ask
sure. Before I get to you, Adam, and just again to say that again, this is just around the Political Party Funding Act, and like I said, the act as we are sitting here is going through a few changes in terms of the thresholds, but also in terms of the Electoral Amendment Act that includes independent candidates. So this has to be altered a bit as well. Adam?
I was just going to ask Minhaj, in terms of those other sources that you were talking about there. For this particular declaration or set of declarations, membership fees wouldn't be included, would they? So when I know that, because this came up, I think over the weekend with the EFF, that just how much some of their politicians are sort of obliged to pay membership fees, that wouldn't be reflected in these declarations.
No, membership fees wouldn't be disclosed in the quarterly declarations. However, political parties are obliged to submit summaries. Well, the IEC publishes summaries of the party's audited financials, and in those audited financials, we can see how much membership fees parties receive. But this tool doesn't display that.
Yet.
Yes. Just some more of your comments and your questions. Sean, what's the next data set I'm supposing it's when's the next data set going into the tracker? How do you see this tool growing? Like we said, the first set of the new financial year, so it will be April, May, June of the 2023, no? Of the next financial year. I'm a bit slow right now. That should be before the end of August. Usually the IEC is quite early. They usually release those disclosures a little bit ahead of time. So like I hope it's not going to be today, but it should be before the end of this month. And yeah, how do you see this tool growing? I mean, like I said, the Act is going through some changes. So yeah, we will be updating this and changing and having this tool grow as the Act is amended. In the United States, where there has been clear collaboration between funding by gun lobby funding and member votes, transparency is not the only solution. What other measures do you envisage? Minhaj?
Yeah, okay. I'll just quickly respond to Sean as well as Fazila. Look, everyone who's going to be using this tool in the next phase are guinea pigs. And we haven't done like I'm blurring out. I'm not sure why. That's odd. We haven't done proper testing on it. So this is the testing. And if there's more information that we could show, then we hope that people will reach out to us. There is a little button on the tool, but we also will look into including other sets of information like the sets that Adam mentioned. We are at the bottom of the tool. We have a sort of spreadsheet that gives more information on each of the donors. We are going to be spending more time on making more comprehensive that information, at looking deeper into the big donors, like Patrice Motsepe and the companies he's linked to, for example, like people who are less known, like Martin Mosha, and what his interests are. Surprisingly, it's very difficult to find information on people like that. And then we're also going to be talking to some of our partners like Corruption Watch to see how we can also link issues of procurement to the tool. If for example, procurement and tenders, and also political decisions. Shaylin spoke about, for example, in the past year, in the past 2 years, the coal energy lobby has been lobbying the ANC in particular hard. At the same time, ANC has received millions from companies linked to coal. So we want to use a tool, want to illustrate those things in a more evidence-based way through the tool. So those are different ways we can use to grow the tool. Then on Fazila's question about the US gun lobby, let me just look for it. So Fazila, the Party Funding Act doesn't just deal with transparency. Transparency is part of it. It also speaks about accountability as it appears in the Constitution, and how the right to vote, right? So how do voters and ordinary people have a say in decisions, have an equal say in decisions made about them? Currently, with the current funding regime, it's not equal. People with money have have a bigger say. The coal lobby has a bigger say. The online gambling lobby has a bigger say. So the Party Funding Act does speak about accountability as a core principle, but it's very limited in how it enforces that. And it enforces that really through placing a limit on how much donors can donate, and that limit is huge. It's 15 million rand. We've been arguing that that limit needs to be reduced significantly, and yeah, that we do believe will enhance accountability.
Minaj, while I still have you here, here is an interesting question. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but it's by Bulelani. What I'm trying to get here is that, is it possible to have missing data or undisclosed data obtained from other institutions than just the IEC? How possible is it, and what would be the complications if possible? Yeah, he's talking about the recent judgment along the lines of SARS can disclose tax records of individuals that is of public interest. So he wants to know, can we get, how can we get information from these institutions? I mean, I'm just thinking of PIA, right? But that is obviously not something that is that speaks to this tool, or would it at some point speak to this tool, perhaps maybe 2-3 years time?
Yeah, that's an important. Sorry, I have no idea why Zoom has decided to blow my whole. It's very, very weird. That's an important question, and I think Shaylin, you're right. PIA is one way to access the information, but it's also not so much a question for us, but a question for the IEC, whose role it is to manage these processes, and the IEC and also conduct investigations. And the IEC has said previously publicly that they are, for example, setting up a team of investigators to investigate evidence that they receive, and they're also working with fiscal organizations who have information. I can't recall what the body is that monitors money that comes into the country, but they are working with that body. Sorry, it slipped my mind. I'm not sure whether they're working with SARS to conduct investigation, but that is something that we would ask them. And yeah, other than that, the public and organizations like ourselves do have PIA at our disposal to access those types of information.
Thank you, Minhaj. There's just 2 questions by C9. Do we have a sense of in-kind support of parties? Yes. So in the tool, you can filter down to, so parties can get donations. So donations are defined by monetary, so actual hard cash, or in-kind donations. So in-kind donations is anything like paying for gala dinners, paying for training, anything of that sort. So this information we do get from the IEC, as I said, most of this information, 90% of this information we get from the IEC's disclosures. The rest we do our own investigations. The IEC, I think it was probably just the first disclosure, they did include like the type of in-kind donations. I don't remember seeing that after that. But yeah, in-kind donations is anything around, so donors should disclose what the donation is for. And again, it's like for gala dinners, any training sessions, billboards, because it's election season coming up. So yeah. So yeah, that's just information that we get from the IEC. Otherwise, we will do our own investigations on that. And then you also ask, how do we manage the splitting of party donations to circumvent the 15 million rand limits? Example, the Oppenheimer's approach. That's a very interesting question. I'll ask Minhaj just to come in here for a moment before I do. So yes, if you don't know by now, the Political Party Funding Act sets a maximum threshold at 15 million. So a donor is only allowed to donate 15 million rand in one financial year. But what we have seen, and mentioning the Oppenheimer's approach, as we've seen many members, for instance, of the one family giving donations. We've also seen Patrice Motsepe as well, him being linked as a director to various organizations, giving funding to political parties. This is a bit of a loophole, and this is, without going into more detail, but this is something that MAV Accounts is looking to remedy in terms of the Political Party Funding Act. But yeah, that is something that we need to look at, to tighten a bit in terms of it being a loophole. Minhaj, you want to add to this?
I think you covered it, Shannon. But yeah, just to add that this is a very complicated question that is something we're trying to figure out. I mean, one, we have asked the courts to help remedy that. But what we've done in the tool is we have grouped the Oppenheimers, for example. So we have tried to identify interrelated donors. So for example, family members like the Oppenheimer, which in itself is sort of an empire. But also equally important is companies and trusts who have the same director or directors, like the three big companies that Patrice Motsepe is the sole director of. So Patrice Motsepe doesn't need to the company doesn't need to disclose that Patrice is the director. It just needs to disclose the company name. We have to then go and find that information. So that's a very important information, something that we do consider as a loophole in the act, and something that needs to be remedied.
Thank you, Minhaj. Just seeing if there's any other questions. I think we have covered. I think we have covered everything. But yeah, this is pretty much the Whose Vote Counts tool. We are now in August. I feel like we've spent a whole year trying to put this thing together, but it's finally live. It's finally ready for everybody to use. It's on our website, myvotecounts.org.za. I added the link in the chat box over there. On the page, you will also see a little how-to video just to go over the features of the tool as well. And again, if you have any suggestions or questions or anything, you can just click the suggestions button, a big orange button, you won't miss it, and pop us an email for anything that we've probably missed or any suggestions. Again, I mean, this is based on the Political Party Funding Act. We can expect changes to this thing, but for us, the main thing is we really just want this information out there, especially now because it's election season, and this information is really crucial for people to have this and make an informed vote at the ballot box, as well as just to see where parties' interests lie, etc., etc. Just double checking the chat box if everything is covered. Where's the chat box? I mean the Q&A, I mean. But yeah, I think that covers it. Adam, thank you so very much. Is there anything you want to add? No, but otherwise, thank you so much. And also for dealing with all my WhatsApps asking you for things. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure. And yeah, looking forward to building version 2. Yeah.
Yeah. And Minhaj, is there anything you maybe want to add before we close?
No, thank you, Adam. Thank you to Open Up for being on this journey with us and continuing to be on it with us. And thank you everyone for joining.
Yes. Yeah, so again, whose vote counts? On our website, the link is over in the chat box, but on our website, you won't miss it. This recording, I did not record this, but we were streaming live on YouTube, so you can just hop over to our YouTube page to look to watch this or to rewatch this, sorry. And yeah, thank you so very much for joining this conversation. Whose vote counts? Please use it. Thank you so much.